Welcome into Studio S, everybody. Typically, we wouldn't start the show this way, but obviously what happened last night in Cincinnati deserves to be mentioned. You've no doubt seen it by now. You've no doubt been reading the tweets and the Instagram messages about it and everything like that. It was horrifying what happened in Cincinnati last night. It was tragic and it was shocking, and everyone I know was hoping and praying that Damar Hamlin makes a speedy recovery from what happened last night in Cincinnati. And there's nothing I can say to start a program that is profound other than, to remind us that what we watch and what we bet on every single Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, etc., is a game and nothing more than that, and shouldn't be treated as anything other than that. But the physical toll taken on by these guys and girls is real, and that's a perspective that unfortunately we have to be reminded of, and that's what happened last night. But to open the show, I'd rather talk about who Damar Hamlin is. He's a Pennsylvania native, as am I, as are many people who work here at Sporttrade from McKees Rocks. If you're unfamiliar, that is a suburb of Pittsburgh, and he stayed home to play at Pitt and was an absolute stud before being drafted by the Buffalo Bills just a couple years ago. But he's also a giver. Damar runs a toy drive that he had hoped would raise just $2,500 or $2,500 rather this year. And at last check, I checked just before the show, that GoFundMe has now reportedly brought in over $4 million. So thank you to the generosity of folks around the country who have rallied around him and his cause and what he's going through right now. That money also going towards his foundation, which does go back to not only the toy drive, but school drives, kids camps, and a lot more than that. So all we need right now is to not really focus on the playing of football so much, but we need Damar to recover so he can hand deliver some of those gifts himself next Christmas. There's no real way to transition off of that, but this is, of course, a show that is put on by Sporttrade, which is a sports betting company. Joining me today are two of my favorite coworkers here, and the brains behind a lot of the market data that we're going to talk to you about today. Jack Larkin, Ryan McNamara, thank you so much for being here. But this is a show about betting within the Sporttrade markets. So we're not going to hear sling picks and tell you what you should be betting on the playoffs. I don't think that's the time for that. But it is a good time, I think, gentlemen, to sort of reflect and see what teams have outperformed their market expectation as we sort of move this program from one of, let's talk about sports betting -2.5, -3.5, +4.5. And we want to take this to a place of where we are looking at the markets and how they're changing, dictated by not only performance, but how people are trading on the app as well. So that's a long-winded way of saying hello, gentlemen. And I'm really excited that you're both here today.
Yep. Thanks so much for having us. We love what you've done with the show and where the show is heading. So cool to be here.
Well, let's dive in, because what you guys have been able to put together, I think, is incredibly fascinating. And it's not the last time we're going to see both of you on here. And we are super excited because it's the first show that we're going to sort of unveil what I am calling and what Ryan is continually telling me not to call, but the Sporttrade Power Index. I think this is amazing. This is, again, taking a look from a markets perspective, and I'll pull it up right now for the first time, the Sporttrade Power Index for the NFL. Now, this is based upon ROI, return on investment, by team. So you guys decide who wants to take it from here. What are we looking at, and what should we be looking at in terms of what is most telling in your opinion?
Totally. Yeah. So Dan, actually, is there any way we can start with the initial, like the index,
of course,
chart in descending order? Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about how the idea came up. When I was in college, I was obsessed with the sports gambling landscape at the time. OddsShark was the only affiliate tool available for sort of market surveillance, if you will. It's so cool to see with the incredible work that the Action Network has done over the years. And in addition, a lot of the affiliates like Unabated that we use on a daily basis. So what I was always really interested in conveying was, at the time, there was a basketball team. It was the Oakland Golden Grizzlies, and they went 25 and
you don't
9.
have to remind me about the Horizon League darlings.
The Horizon League darlings. I used to volume.
I used to live and breathe Horizon League. I covered the UWGB Phoenix for years.
Dan, you are speaking our language.
Go Phoenix.
Yep. So the Golden Grizzlies were this, at the time, they were a middle tier Horizon League team. There's some good teams in there like Wisconsin, Green Bay, et cetera. And they went 25-9. And I remember at one point that season, they were about 21-3 in that 2016-2017 season. And they were an underdog most games. And what I was fascinated by was, I remember thinking at the time, well, everyone's betting on like the Warriors and, big NBA teams and all these big markets, but don't they realize that like the Oakland Golden Grizzlies are the hottest team in the whole space right now, right? And then I sort of like had this idea where, I thought it'd be really cool to track how the teams pay out on the season, and then sort of aggregate them and put them all together, and you can organize it by sport. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea. Now, I'd like to just talk real quick about like some of the challenges within like sort of like the traditional sportsbook model, I guess, for like, especially for content creation and whatnot. I'm a huge Sports Insights fan, and I love what they did with the public betting percentages. Like that at the time was the only way you can tell who was on what side. So I was a huge fan of it. But unfortunately, like I always thought in my head, ideally, this is a real number, right? This is like a real dollar amount, right? And so how cool is it that like now we're in a position where we can report in contracts traded and real volume with real dollar amounts from the exchange. And I think it's a great sample to use. So.
Awesome. Well, I'll pull it back up and you guys can sort of walk us through exactly what we're seeing here. I'm seeing maybe unsurprisingly a lot of teams that are positioning or already in the playoffs.
Yep, absolutely. So essentially the team value concept, it measures team performance upon valuation throughout the season. So a team, every team comes into the season, they're valued as either a contender, middle tier team, or a bottom tier team. And then that valuation gets adjusted as the season progresses, right? So take, for example, like the Philadelphia Eagles were valued as a contender. They were probably valued as definitely a favorite to win their division. They performed like a Super Bowl favorite for the first half of the season, and they've since fallen off, and that valuation has been adjusted. So what this does is this tracks if you had bought one contract on a team every game in the season, and it kind of gives us a good metric to work off for how the team has performed upon valuation throughout the season. So,
Jack, anything to add?
No, I mean, Ryan hit the nail on the head. I think it's interesting, Dan, when we use both from a dollar amount as well as, I know you alluded to the ROI percentage, and comparing those values to see how teams do perform throughout the year, whether they're underperforming, whether they're overperforming, and how the market can adjust. It's fascinating. And this view is great because it gives you a tangible dollar amount for what you could earn or what you would have lost betting on each team to win throughout the year.
So I'm looking at the season lows here, the furthest to the right here, and I'm looking at the Philadelphia Eagles, and I say, at what point could they possibly have been down $69? But then you think about it, they have been priced, and we track these prices, and I tweet them out every Monday. They are consistently priced at $75 and up. So every win they have, of which they have 13 of them, you're only seeing about $25 per win. But when they are valued that high and they lose, that value craters. And that obviously affects their power index value. So when you're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs, who have won 12 games, now 13 games, but at least 12 games, 5 consecutive years, right? And you see their season low is 0. That tells me, okay, they're winning all the games they're supposed to win, and they're barely losing the games that are toss-ups.
Yep.
Because what are their losses this year? They lost to the Buffalo. I mean, they have a terrible loss to the Indianapolis Colts. That doesn't help. But like the Bills, very tight loss in which the Bills were actually favored. The only game this year the Chiefs were not favored was that contest. So I do want to back up to now this ROI, right, which is now showing the full 32 teams. And this to me is where I think it gets really interesting, because we can look at that graph all day, but I look at this and I'm saying the Minnesota Vikings. How could this? How could this be? This team has lost 40-0 against the Cowboys. They lost 50-0 against Green Bay. They lose all of the games against the ones that matter. But it goes back to what you were saying. Because the way the contracts, and again, we're using shares now as well. The way the shares are priced on Sporttrade, you could have bought the Vikings at a value so many times this year because the market makers didn't respect them and they kept winning.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, and that's exactly what this shows. And if you take a look at some of these teams, I mean, are the Giants the best team in the league? No, but they were valued as a below average team coming into the season. So they were only expected to probably win 6 or 7 games. And correct me, what do they have? 8 or 9 now?
They have 9 wins.
They have 9, right? So, but look, I mean, they're the second most profitable team, according to ROI in the season, right? And then you have your outliers too. Look at the Chiefs. I think that this is a really cool example. What exists right now is it's very limited towards, and it's very ATS heavy against the spread, right? So the Chiefs, for example, are 5-10-1 against the spread on the season. But if you look at them, if you had just bought a contract on them to win every game, I mean, you'd be up, what's that say, Dan? 29.37%?
Yep.
Like that's pretty solid, right? And so for the audience and anyone watching, the ROI is calculated by taking the total cost of all the contracts per team on the season. I know this gets a little complicated. And then we essentially calculate, once again, how much you would have gained or lost based on the results.
I think one of the most shocking ones here are the Steelers. The Steelers at 4, and I'll pull up with that sort of the teams that have been hot of late, right?
Yeah.
The Steelers since week 8 are the 4th highest earner, and you've got some interesting ones in there as well. The Detroit Lions, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Bengals, maybe not too surprising, and the Steelers, and then the 49ers round out the top 5. But when I look at that, guys, I say, well, yeah, obviously, right? Like those teams have been winning games. But you have to look at this now from not a sports betting perspective. And that's what we were talking about before we went live, is when you are trading on Sporttrade, when you're betting on Sporttrade, because of our contract, our share structure, you can't approach it from saying, well, the Eagles are priced at 85, there's no value there. You have to approach it as saying, well, if I make 15 by putting down 85, if I did that in the stock market, I would take that, right? If your ROI is 30% on a team over a 16, 17, 18-week period, if you apply that same mathematical structure to any stock in the stock market, you'd be doing backflips. Jim Cramer would there would be Twitter profiles attached to your picks and not Jim Cramer's being tracked about how bad they are. Like that.
Absolutely.
That's how it would be handled.
Dan, I think it really comes down to, like, if I ask you what is the average volume of the Green Bay Packers on the season, what would you tell me?
To win, like shares to win?
Yeah, like to win.
Well, they're a very popular team with a quarterback that people either love or hate. So I would say they would probably be pretty high. I would say middle of the pack, having already seen the graph.
So what? So, but that's kind of my point. Is like, for the first time ever, someone is able to answer that question and give me some sense of like a real answer, right?
Yeah.
If I asked you 3 months ago, what's the average volume of the Green Bay Packers, you would say, I have no idea, right? So that's what's really cool about this is like, all right, for the first time, we're using contracts. And Jack, I mean, please, I was going to ask you this beforehand. Is it correct to assume that essentially the handle amount could be the number of contracts and then times 100 for the dollar amount, I guess, on the season?
Right. What we're looking at, if you were to say amount risk. So yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So just for anyone watching, like if they wanted to sort of convert, we use contracts traded as our way to track it. But yeah, but Dan, if you want to go ahead and
So what we're looking at now is contracts, shares bought for a team to win. And you mentioned the Green Bay Packers; they're just 20th. Nobody believes in the Cleveland Browns, as they shouldn't. Only 302 over 18 weeks is not great. 17 weeks. Yeah. Again, the Minnesota Vikings, 7,200 contracts for the Minnesota Vikings to win, which is interesting, guys, because that can mean a couple things. But to me, it means that the disrespect, the thought from the market makers that they're really not that good compared with the public perception of them, or at least relative to that number, says that they have the market makers have continuously missed on this team week in and week out.
Absolutely. If you take a look, if you bring that index back up, I mean, Dan, these are not some sexy names that are sort of at the bottom of the list, right? You take a look at that Pittsburgh Steelers team. I mean, where they're ranked like 27th or 28th in volume.
Oh, you're looking at volume. Sorry, I had the wrong one.
Yeah, the volume chart.
In volume, the Steelers are 29th. But
right.
Yeah.
But they've been performing pretty well. So a lot of teams down there. I mean, the public's obviously gotten the Chiefs right, and there are exceptions. The Chiefs, and that's what's beautiful about this is this isn't to say, this is not financial advice, right? It is what we always kind of joke about and say,
Sure.
but like this is really open ended. Never forget the Patriots. What did they go? That one seed they went had some crazy against the spread record when they beat the Falcons, right? They were this outlier. No one could put a price on them. And who knows, maybe that could be the Chiefs this year, right? Or it's one of these dog contenders that was like the Vikings that was valued as, I don't know. They were valued at, they were a dog to win their division behind the Packers. The Packers were a significant favorite, right?
Mhm.
You could have a team like the Vikings that's just a significant outlier and performs all season.
So it's interesting. It's interesting to me, Ryan, because I look at these top two teams. Top three teams. I mean, maybe the most surprising thing is that the Denver Broncos have 62.
Yeah.
Hold on, I need to come back on camera for this. 6,200 shares of the Broncos to win their football games have been traded on Sporttrade. 6,200. We're 6,100 in week 1 or 2 when we launched, because I look at that and I cannot believe that. But what it shows is, I guess, the randomness of whatever happens, right? Because you could say the same thing for the Vikings. But I think you're seeing two very different approaches in trading style. Because when I look at the Vikings at number 1, I say, okay, there's a team where people are finding value relative to the number, value relative to their skill level as a team. And then you look at the Chiefs at number 2, and that's people eating their vegetables to me. That's people saying, okay, well, I know the Chiefs are great. Again, that ROI we talked about. I know most often than not, again, they continuously win 12 games a year, 13 games a year. If I just continually trade on them on the money line, I'm going to see an ROI that's positive. So to me, that represents two completely different trends of thinking. One is as a sports bettor, and one is somebody who is more or less investing on a longer time horizon on one team's continuous outcome.
And I think that's what makes it so great, Dan, too, is the fact that, the ROI and the percentages and the indexes is awesome. And it's more of a, what if you were to buy a contract on this team each week? But then when you couple it with the volume metrics and show, hey, if you were to buy a contract on the Chiefs or the Vikings each week, you'd be up X amount of percent. And then you see in the volume metrics, customers are doing that. But then conversely, you see customers buying the Bucks or the Broncos, and they're down significantly on the season. So it just shows you this, a little bit more of a connection of what if you were to do this versus what customers are actually tending to gravitate towards.
So I want to go back to the descending power index, right? So if I'm looking at this based on what we're discussing, guys, if I just took the Kansas City Chiefs every single week, I'm up $341 per contract.
So overall, Dan, if you bought one contract on the Chiefs, you would have $341. And this is for every game on the season. And
at no point am I dipping below zero, which is incredible. Now, obviously,
they stay positive all year.
Yeah, obviously, this is hindsight is 2020, and you can't always bank on these things. But you look at some of these names, right? If you were to take this approach every single week, I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but you're looking at an extremely positive ROI. Let's say if I went in every week and I said, well, I love the Chiefs, I love the Bills, the Cowboys, and the Eagles. I'm going to bet them to win every single week, except for the games in which, obviously the Cowboys and Eagles are playing each other. And then the one-off Bills-Chiefs game. That, to me, if the goal on Sporttrade is to be profitable, if the goal is to be a profitable sports trader, which is what we always talk about on Market Movers, that's a lot better to me than combing through, the totals and the spreads and then trying to sort of figure it all out in real time. Obviously, we want you to buy and sell. We want you to trade. We want you to do all those things. But the goal is to make money, right? And this seems like a pretty relatively, for lack of a better term, easy way of doing that.
Yeah. I think just as the market becomes more efficient, like there's just going to be more and more opportunities for people to go in and find opportunities. And so I just never really understood why, I could take a look at Apple's stock, right? And I could get all the different metrics for the way that Apple was trading, and I couldn't get it for the Green Bay Packers, right? And so all this really is like, this is just trying to provide like an analytical framework for decision making. So if you're looking for a red hot team that is performing really well upon valuation, that you think is going to continue to do so, then like you can find it and you have numbers to back it up. If you're a garbage man like myself and you're looking for a team that's maybe slightly overperforming but is the lowest volume team on the exchange, like that's what I'm looking for every weekend. And that's really just to exploit like the public bias that is said to exist. I don't know exactly like what the actual percentage is that's like built in, right, to traditional bookmaking, but it's just the way I think about it, and this is just a way for people to see it and make a decision based off the numbers.
Jack, what is the thing that surprised you the most of any of the graphs that we pulled up? We have the power index, we've got sort of like the hot team index, right, for lack of a better term, the volume chart. Has anything surprised you the most? We haven't even looked at the team performance, but what has surprised you?
No, it's a good question, and there's so much. I think, to be honest, what jumped out at me the most is a few of the examples in the midseason change chart. Mm-hmm. So since midseason, if you look at teams like the Jags, teams like the Lions, the Steelers, the fact that you had these teams that you essentially, a lot of folks, probably including myself, wrote off midway through the season and somewhat forgot about, and now they're on this win streak jockeying for playoff positions. It just shows you that, we always say in financial terms, you want to buy low, you want to sell high. Well, this is the epitome of buying into a team at their lowest when the Lions are down, and have a losing record or a negative on the season, and they turn it around. They're now up over $250 in the last, call it 9 weeks. That's, to me, is what jumped out significantly.
The team names are fascinating. Lions, Jaguars, Steelers. I keep coming back to that. I mean, there's almost $700, more than $750 of value, literally just riding those teams. Now, again, hindsight 2020, right? Like you have to be able to predict the market, but I think there's something to be said for identifying an undervalued team and just riding them week in and week out. I mean, considering the randomness of NFL Sundays too, right? Why do that? Why wouldn't you do that as opposed to sort of throwing darts in other places? I do want to bring up this because again, a team power index performance on the season. I do think this is interesting as well. Maybe not a surprise. The Kansas City Chiefs, just a complete upward trajectory. A team like the Ravens has an injury at quarterback, and unsurprising, they continue to fall back to the pack. Whereas like a team like the Giants maybe falls back to reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that those are all fair to say. I mean, what we wanted to do here is really paint like some of the extreme pictures. This is obviously for the playoff teams, and just the Chiefs as an example of this team where the market maker, they can't seem to put a price on them, and they keep performing upon valuation, and they were valued as a contender coming into the season, right? So like this could be the Patriots 2.0, right? Of when they went and beat the Falcons. Vikings, pretty much the same thing. If you take a look at it, I mean, they've sort of tailed off a little bit, but once again, that's the highest ROI team and the highest volume team on the exchange. Two similar stories, one in the AFC, one in the NFC. And then the Steelers, a fringe playoff team. I'll hesitate to call them a playoff team as a Ravens fan just yet, but I mean, take a look. I mean, the number 4 ranked team by ROI on the season, and they were horrible halfway through the year, and they were not valued. They were valued as certainly the 4th spot coming into the season in the AFC North, right? And they've kind of just gotten hot. Bengals obviously red hot. They were not. I mean, tale of two halves with the Bengals. And then take a look at like the 49ers. Obviously, very, very similar story to the Bengals, just in the NFC. Really tough start, and then obviously got red hot as the defense was playing well and they started winning games. Got Christian McCaffrey. So yeah, a lot of different stories there.
I think the data is fascinating. And as we continue to sort of mature here on the show, would love to find more interesting ways of talking about this in real time, showing the trends going into games and stuff like that. Obviously, we're not doing that today given what has happened. And that's okay. Jack, before we say goodbye, I feel like I have to ask you, you're the perfect guest for this question. we are seeing an influx of what I would consider to be very, very sharp money come in on Sporttrade on my TCU Horned Frogs, the Underfrogs, going up against your Georgia Bulldogs in a national championship game. How size this game up for me, and how nervous are you for a massive upset?
Dan, I unfortunately, I felt like I saw a lot of sharp money coming in for the Ohio State game as well.
Okay.
And I promise you, after seeing that, I was very nervous. I did
Oh.
not like our chances at all. That being said, I have to respect the money. I have to respect the market that comes in on your Horned Frogs. But I have to go with my Bulldogs.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, obviously you're going to take Georgia. But like 1 to 10, how nervous are you right now? I mean, what a value. TCU trading at 1850 out of 100.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I would go with a 7. I feel confident that we will win this game. But when you have a TCU team that is playing, I mean, they're just defying expectations week in and week out. I mean, we're just talking about finding undervalued teams that you can profit off of. I mean, This TCU team continues to defy what a lot of people expect. So
yeah,
I'm gonna go with a soft 7 out of 10 on the nervous scale. But obviously I'll be pulling for my Dogs.
Now the sharps have heard you. TCU now up to 19.5. The markets are moving.
Wow.
Georgia's now. At what point does Georgia become a bit of a discount here?
Listen, we're just talking about riding the Chiefs as that long-term investment.
That's true.
You could have a pretty good ROI on the Dogs.
And you would have a great ROI on the Dogs, considering they didn't lose a game last year, did they?
No.
Yeah,
no,
so they have not lost a
are
game since
riding quite the
2021.
hot streak.
Well, we'll see what happens. It'll be an exciting game. Don't take my Horned Frogs lightly. I'm a Max Duggan guy now, which I wasn't prior to this weekend. So welcome to the bandwagon, everybody. Ryan, your thoughts? Yep. Do you have a who do you think's going to win the Natty?
I'm too boring. All I see is I see 19.5. I mean, a significant underdog. That just means the payout's bigger. So I'm probably on them if I had to pick. But
stats and info telling us compliments of Greg Rappaport that your Dogs lost to Alabama in the SEC title game last year, which they did.
Oh yes, non-regular season game.
I guess Jack doesn't care, Greg, because they won a national championship.
Yeah, what game is he talking about? I seem to forget every one of them except the national championship.
I would know. I went to Temple. All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much. This has been Market Movers on a Tuesday. We are back tomorrow, and Anita Marks is going to join us on Thursday for our preview of the NFL Week 18 slate, and then we'll preview the playoffs on Monday with her as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been Market Movers. We'll be back here tomorrow.